in the beginning, there was nothing. And nothing is really hard to think about. But there had to be something else there, a potential, a moment, a yearning. And that yearning burst forth. And all that ever was, is, or ever shall be, flared into magnificent light. And the dance began. The grand dance between the two great lovers, life and entropy. The two great forces that bind the entire cosmos together. Now, we call these by many names, some metaphorical, others to talk about deeper, more subtle aspects of this blessed union. But the heart of all creation is love. And if we are going to practice Druidcraft, if we are going to practice magic, then we need to be in touch with that love. Let's discuss the ways of love as we walk together down creation's paths. Hello, everyone. My name is Charlie. I am a Christo-Pagan Druid and priest of Bridget.
Hello, everyone. My name is Brian. I'm a Christo-Pagan Druid and sous chef to the Dagda.
And today we are continuing our study through Philip Carr-Gomm's wonderful book, Druidcraft. And we're now on chapter 3, The Ways of Love. This is a really powerful chapter that really gets at the heart of what I think so many people miss about magic, and why for a lot of people, when they try out magic, it doesn't work because they're so used to magic the way that it is in the movies, in books, and in video games, where you say the incantation and it just works, or you wave the magic wand and magic just happens. You burn the right incenses in the right order and poof, magic. In a lot of stories, that's the easiest way to write it, because doing sometimes years and years of connecting to and learning to understand the subtle energies of the cosmos is hard. Think about it. Even in Star Wars, they have to speed run this, right? Luke knows nothing about the Force when he and Obi-Wan get on the Millennium Falcon, but he has to be ready to be set up to be a Jedi and a hero by the end of the movie. So, well, we're going to speed run him through connecting to the Force just in time for the story to take off. And we need him to be even more of a Jedi in the second movie. So we're going to send him off to see Yoda, and we're going to watch him speed run through even more of this so that he can have an even more exciting fight with Darth Vader. All the films have to speed run through this because we don't like spaciousness in our cinema. We don't like to just sit around and watch people meditate. And that is a lot of the practice. But before we get into all that, if you haven't already, don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, whatever the terminology happens to be on whatever the app is you're listening to us on. We do original Christo-Pagan and Druid episodes 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. And here we are in the middle of our Druidcraft 101 series, and you don't want to miss a thing. I love the stories that are in this chapter, especially the story of Angus, who you'll very often hear me refer to as Mac Og, the son of the young one. Angus is a very interesting energy and a very interesting spirit, and the brother of Bridget, who, as you all know, I work for. And the story of how he and Caer Ibormeith met, how they became this celestial divine couple, to me, it's one of the most powerful stories of Irish mythology, mainly because he's literally the god of love. So when you think of like Cupid, he had to kidnap a girl to fall in love, but he's Cupid, so he just kidnaps a girl, and you get the story of Cupid and Psyche, right? A lot of the stories about the gods of love, they're just the gods of love. And if you're not familiar with Cupid and Psyche, it's Beauty and the Beast. That's Cupid and Psyche. He kidnaps her, but forbids her from looking at his face, always wears a mask, always lives in the shadows. One day she sneaks in while he's sleeping and sees him, and he kicks her out, and then they're in love, and their love brings them back together. There's a whole, you know the story. It's somewhere between actually Beauty and the Beast and the Phantom of the Opera. The story of Angus and Caer Ibormeith is very different because he dreams about her. And not only is he the god of love, but I think is the most relatable god of love, because not only does he dream about her, but he is convinced she's real and he's going to find her. And his love for her makes him ill. Like, he just loves her so much that he literally is shutting down. And his father, the Dagda, literally searches everywhere. His mother searches everywhere. His father bullies another king to search for this woman. Like, we have to find this woman. We have to heal my boy. And when they finally find her, he orders the king, well, give her to my son. The king is like, oh, I can't. She's more powerful than me. Now let's stop there for a minute in the story, right? I can't. She's more. This is something that we see in a lot of Irish stories. It's something we see in a lot of the old Druid stories, where the female is generally the most powerful figure in there, from the Morrigan to the Bive to Maeve. This female empowerment is such an important part of these stories because, one, you love to see it, and two, you don't see it in a lot of other mythologies. But no, I can't just give her to you. She's more powerful than me. So they go to war, and he's still like, no, I can't. She's. I'll tell you where she is. So he finally tells them where she is, and they take Angus, put him on a bed, carry him out there because he's just so weak. Like, how many of us remember being that person in high school or knowing that person in high school? It's just so lovesick that like, I can't move. And there, he not only finds her, he sees her, he finds out that every year on Samhain, she turns into a swan with all of her handmaidens. There's Angus running towards her. He reaches out for her and he turns into a swan too. How beautiful. They end up falling in love, making love in a way that is so powerful, time literally stops. Hopefully you have that experience at least once in your life, if that is something you're into. And this is a way to understand the universe, this yearning, this longing. And it's such a good way to understand both the universe and magic. So much of magic is this yearning. I think too many magicians and practitioners put too much stress on will, and they forget about faith. They forget about intention. They forget about yearning. And as we're going to talk later, when we get into the actual process of spell crafting and actually working the magic, this yearning, this searching, this questing heart is going to be a very important part in making the magic actually real, in making the magic actually manifest, in making the magic flow. We have to start with this love. And so the
I
whole chapter
really
is about love.
I really love how they spend a lot of time in this chapter covering it from that perspective. It is the union of two things. They showed in the story and later on when they're talking about electricity as electricity, but it is the union of these two parts that makes up electricity what it is,
Positive and a
and
negative that makes the current.
that makes the current. I really, really love how it sets up stuff for understanding magic practices and its operatings, because a lot of that is through the union of two parts, being able to see something as a whole and seeing its components.
Well, I think the biggest problem with this metaphor for me, and I say this as a non-binary person, is this constant invocation of the binary genders of male and female.
Yeah,
Because like,
I was it's something I really enjoyed Philip Carr-Gomm put in later on when he starts to talk about some of the practices. He even addresses the binary language and the problems of the binary language. And I thought that was really neat too, that he does address that, because there is a lot of magic practices get almost obsessed
yeah,
with male and female union. And I really like that he took the time to go, no, it is union of two things. Doesn't necessarily mean male and female. It's just a union of two things as one thing, being united through that love, through that deep yearning.
and
That's where the
that's
magic is. So often the magic practice gets so caught up on that male and female. If you get stuck in that binary language, you could lose out on so much.
it also makes you start doing things that give rise to what we will generously call accidental sexisms,
Yes, and
because
misogynies.
and accidental misogynies, especially because you have to start then projecting onto a gender certain traits. And this is where things get really, really interesting because in Kabbalah, for example, the pillar of severity is the female pillar and the pillar of mercy is the male pillar. So the male pillar is seen as the passive and the female pillar is seen as the active. Traits of justice, judgment, and strength and victory and understanding are on the female pillar. And the male pillar has compassion, literally chesed, loving kindness, wisdom, and endurance. we start seeing these getting broken up. Anytime you talk to people using this gendered language, they're like, but not all women, not all men, not all, there's this immediate kind of pushback. Before we continue on with this, if this binary language is something that you want to see ways to get beyond, I've recommended this book before. Infus Books, wonderful, wonderful. I'm going to call it an opus. Like, it's beyond just a book. Queer Kabbalah, and that's with two Q's. That's queer with a Q and Kabbalah with a Q, because it is a book about the Hermetic Kabbalah. Really spends chapters in there deconstructing this gender binary and looking at different ways to talk about these energies that don't rely on so many gendered stereotypes. It's a really, really good book, and I highly recommend it, if for no other reason than that. But if you're interested in getting into the Kabbalah, since that's one of the things Philip brings up in here, is Kabbalah does introduce this third line in here, where you have the pillar of mercy and the pillar of severity, but you also have the pillar of equilibrium in between. But the issue is, when you start digging into the texts and the history of this, it isn't that everything on the one pillar is masculine and everything on the other pillar is feminine and everything in the middle is non-binary. That's not really how those genders ended up get played out. And all of them end up being gender fluid energies because depending on the circumstance and who's writing, they're either masculine or feminine, and it gets all kinds of confusing and a mess because we're applying this language to it.
And it really breaks down because a lot of that gendered language has to do with the individual's cultural background. For instance, in German, they have a female sun and a male moon. But in French, you have a male sun and a female moon. So
And
even in the
wars.
wars were fought over this, you know,
And and I mean, that's being a bit facetious, but it's
but
not at the
also
same time, because it's a
at the
different
same
way.
time, there's that cultural influence because then that trickles down. So if you're stuck in this binary perspective, then it will hinder your magical practices, especially if you're doing any lunar or solar magic.
Even that becomes really, really complex in how you're doing this, because a lot of us are calling out to a moon goddess. And again, in German and in the Nordic pantheons, the moon is a male god. But there's also a male solar god in the Norse tradition, as well as a female solar god. So it all becomes very complex and it's problematic. That's why I don't prefer, that's more than anything, that's where I don't like the gendered language when dealing with these, and really see them, because to me the moon is probably the most non-binary thing in my practice, because to me there's the sun that radiates and there's the earth that kind of incubates. And in the traditional druid way of thinking of things, the Telek, or earth power, rises up from the earth. The solar power, or the power of the cosmos, radiates down, and where they meet, mingle, and merge, that becomes the lunar power, which I also love because it's a planetary body that reflects the light of the sun. So it is this merger of earth and sun, just literally, not just figuratively.
Not
And
only does it reflect the sun, but it also impacts the entire earth in its influence on the tides, the
yeah,
oceans. It literally pulls the oceans and moves the waters of the entire planet. So it's something that has effect celestially and an effect physic on earth. So symbolically, it's very appropriate.
I think one of my favorite parts of this chapter is when Brendan asks, does this mean monotheists are wrong? Because they're talking about the whole idea of the god and the goddess as the main metaphor for this. And that's when he tells the story of electricity. Seems to be one thing, but it's actually two. And every time I read or listen to this part of the book, my mind immediately goes to Jehovah and his Asherah. Originally, in the older stories, both of these characters were there. There was, depending on the era that you're in, it was either Baal, El, or Jehovah and his Asher. There was a consort there. There was a female goddess in the story, and she was a very powerful figure. And when I say that, we know this for a fact because we have found so many ancient Israelite villages, and the home altar that we find, because they had home altars in these old Israelite villages, were basically you might think of as like an ark. They were a box that had an Asherah pole and generally a bull, which was the symbol for El. or one of the other symbols for El. And in the one surviving Israelite temple, because we actually found one of the Israelite temples survive. It's not the one in Jerusalem. But remember, the one in Jerusalem was not the only one. It's not until Josiah when he starts shutting down all of the other temples. When you go into the Holy of Holies, there were two stones in there, a larger one and a smaller one. Each one had an altar before it. That was probably El and his Asherah, his consort. And so, even in the tradition, when you go back far enough, before monotheism overtook the Israelite faith, and this is why we really need to be very careful here and not talk about the Jewish faith. The Jewish faith really starts coming to its own in the Common Era, because you have the Judean religion, you have the Israelite religion, and then you have the Proto-Israelite faiths that existed. There's some phases in here. It was back in the days before monotheism, it was a henotheistic faith. They believed in one high God and a council of other gods. So there was, in the older stories, and some places where they forgot to cut it out of the Bible, you still find Asherah mentioned. She still gets a few call outs in the Hebrew that are often well disguised in the English so that we don't notice them. But she does make a few guest appearances still because they forgot to cut her out.
One of the things I found really nifty with this whole chapter is the very Yoda, Mr. Miyagi-esque way of teaching practitioner who would be getting into magical practices, because this starts to set up the foundation for all of the work to follow. Casting the spell, magic workings, all of it is a union, a love union made up of your faith, the unseen energies hoped for, your intention, as it's commonly referred to nowadays, in union with the works that you put in. That is all of it summed up. That's why this whole chapter is all about love and union, and how it's one thing, but it's of two parts, because it's those two parts that will make up everything else that one does.
And we'll really get into that later when we start talking about the magic of making, which is one of the three kinds of magic we're going to be talking about in craft. Starting at this point, I also think is smart, because I think this is the one subtle energy that most people have ready access to. Because when we talk about subtle energies, we can talk about the more like use the force loop subtle energies. But we're also talking about the energies such as love, anger, compassion. Every emotion that you have is an energy that can be tapped into and used in this work. But love is the safest one to play with, because love is something that you could have for your pet. Because remember, we're not just talking about romantic love here. That is a recuperation of love so that love is manageable and able to be fit into a box. The modern conception of romantic love. And we're talking about all the different kinds of love, from the love that you have for your pets, the love that you have for your friends, the love that you have for your favorite cup of coffee. You have so much love in your life if you let yourself see it. And some people don't let themselves see it and think, well, I have no love in my life. And yeah, but that you have your favorite shirt. I know you have your favorite shirt. You've told me 1,000 times that's your favorite shirt. You love that shirt. And learning to start seeing all of the things that you have love for and that have love for you is a great way to start training yourself. And it's a wonderfully positive way to start training yourself to start seeing these subtle energies, so that as we get more and more subtle and they get harder and harder to feel, see, and interact with, you have a sense of what you're looking for, because you understand the feelings that are engendered within you. You understand the experiences that go along with it when it's present and when it's absent.
Totally. That's why I made the two pop culture references that I did, because
Mhm.
they're all about doing common everyday things that you're already doing in your life. You just don't realize in this context. And so it's practicing that, learning to become aware that you are doing this already, realizing, oh, so this whole waxing of the car actually is teaching me to
Yeah.
just instinctively pull off defensive maneuvers and stuff. And it's like, yeah, you weren't just doing house chores. Like, you aren't just trying to get that thing from somebody by saying please. You are actually employing magic there. You are hoping for the thing that they had and you employed love, an appeal to their emotion in union,
Step
sometimes the
deeper, like
spell works. Sometimes they hand you the thing that you wanted.
even that one step deeper, like you know, those people that get that car that they love and they're out there, like you're afraid they're going to remove the paint from it because they are polishing it so much and they're taking care of
Mm,
it so much. Or that new piece of jewelry that is always on its special pedestal when it's not being worn. Learning to see and to learn that care and learning, especially when you see that. I find that in my own life, one of the greatest signs of depression or some kind of breakdown in the well-being of my life is when I notice that I'm not cleaning the altar space because that's something that means a lot to me. I'm not taking care of this, that, or the other. I'm not making that favorite cup of tea. I've got a caramel apple tea that I just absolutely love. I'll just stop making it. And I realize I've stopped doing this thing that I love. And it's giving you these tools to start developing this awareness that we're going to need throughout this process. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to use Druidcraft for this introduction to magic, because it really is the step by step taking you in and helping you to feel your way into it. We're not starting with here's a ritual where we're going to try to contact this spirit. Because I've read books like that, and that's a lot more advanced work. We're trying to get people to cast a spell right out from the start. Like, we're not going to talk about spellcraft until the very end of the book.
That's the thing is like, I'm not here to judge how someone gets into the pool. Like you can jump in the deep end, you can jump in the shallow end. This book is I'm going to go down the steps into the shallow end one step at a time and gradually walk deeper and deeper into the pool.
It's an important process because it's learning a lot of the tools of respect, because I've known way too many people that got into magic through, I'm not going to name the books that came out in like the early 90s and late 90s that were very jump
Ooh,
into the pool magic
yeah.
books that quickly found themselves in over their, like they realized they don't even know how to doggy paddle. They are away from the edge of the pool. There's nothing below them and they need somebody to come in and get them. And Ivy the Occult on YouTube just did a wonderful video about how, yes, the occult is dangerous. And I think it's a good video for people to watch, not because you should be scared, not because you should be afraid, but because you need to learn a certain level of respect. I think way too many schools of magic nowadays have drifted into this new age manifestation where it's all sunshine shine and roses. It's all happiness and flowers. I've been practicing magic for around 30 years. And I can tell you, it's not all sunshine and roses. The other crowd do exist. There are mischievous and malevolent energies out there that you can encounter and that can cause trouble and that you can invite into your life and that you'll have to do things to get rid of them. And that's why starting from this groundwork where we're starting from a place of respect and we're starting from these very safe emotions, we're learning how to get into this work in a way that we're making it less likely to get into trouble.
That's why I like using the imagery of jumping into the pool or walking in, because it's not only a matter of how do you enter the water, but if you're not acclimated to the water temperature and it's enough of a shocking difference, you could get yourself into trouble just from the thermal shock. To share a fun story, a very, very young me, my first experience of a pool, I ran and I jumped in the deep end. I didn't even know how to swim. I hit the water. I was like, this is fascinating. It was a wonderful, exciting experience. And I sank. I thankfully didn't panic because I was so fascinated by the whole thing. My eyes were open. I could see everything. I was underwater. It was cool. I literally sat at the bottom of the pool holding my breath. And luckily, a lifeguard was being very attentive and saw a young child run and jump in the deep end and just sink to the bottom. And they dove in and pulled me out because I started to run out of breath. By the time they got me up to the top, I drank a little bit of the pool water. I had to spit it out. But like, sometimes that happens, like, if you're not careful, and even like I said, even jumping in the shallow end, you could still get a thermal shock from the water, cramp up or whatever, and so for some people, walking in gradually and taking their time and acclimating themselves as they go deeper and deeper is a much more appropriate way to get into the practice.
Especially because this is like learning how to swim in the ocean. Like there are sharks,
Yeah,
there are
yeah.
jellyfish in the water, and we need to make sure that you're taking this carefully and in a way that will be safest for you. I had a very similar experience when I was taking swim lessons for the first time. They took us to the pool and they said, okay, everybody into the water. And I ran and jumped into the pool. The water probably wasn't that deep. It was probably like 4 or 5 feet deep, but I was a little child. I would have been about 6, 7 years old when I did this. So 4 or 5 foot water is over my head. It wasn't the deep end, but to the child, it was the deep end. And I did the same thing. Went straight to the bottom of the pool, stood there at the bottom of the pool, looking around like, oh, wow. Wow. And luckily the instructor realized and ran over real quick and grabbed me and took me over to the side of the pool and put my arms on it so that I could hold on. And it was like, okay. First, we're going to teach everyone to float. And that's kind of what we're doing here is we're making sure everybody knows how to float before we start teaching how to swim. Because I don't want anybody to be afraid. We're not trying to scare anybody. But like I said, there's always a danger of when you go to the ocean. This is the metaphor we keep using, right? You go down to the sea with the laws of the returning tide and everything. We're going to go out into the ocean. There are jellyfish in the ocean that can sting. There are various fish that you don't want to step on, right? Because they have either poison spines or just spines that'll cut you up real good. There are corals down there that you don't want to cut yourself on. It's just learning to be safe, learning to be careful. And this is a
And
wonderful inroad into that.
that's the other beautiful thing about this chapter and this stage of the process. Seeing things in terms of unions also will help you in your magical practice to protect you, because there are certain practices out there that they tell you is safe. But once you realize what you are creating a union with and how you are connecting yourself into other things that you, if you were consciously aware of what was happening, you would probably choose not to. This part just will help so much with that. So then you can at least be making an aware choice of,
With
oh, if I do this spell work or this practice, I'm going to be connected in with this thing that I hate. Do you really want to get into a hate marriage or something that's going to be destructive or bring negative energy?
I'm not even that. Not even that. Like before I took my priesthood vows to Bridget, there was about a year of discernment. The idea
Yeah.
arose and there was a lot. This wasn't a spur of the moment. Oh, I'm going to do that. It was a lot of journaling. It was a lot of study. It was a lot of work to decide, is this something? Because I love Bridget. I do not see her as negative, destructive, or any of those things that Brian was talking about. But this is a commitment that it's not just like, I'm going to suck the contract and have vast magical powers. It's, I'm going to agree to do certain work. And I wouldn't call it a union in that sense, but I am employed by Bridget. That is, she's the boss. She calls the shots in a lot of what I do. And so that's another thing. Like, this is a very blessed energy to bring into my life. But do I want to take on those obligations? Do I want to take on those responsibilities? Do I want to take on that work? There's those extra layers there that, again, I think too many people rush into because YouTube and TikTok and all the rest make deity work look easy and simple and light and fun. It can be that, but it's also a job. It's work. There are things that you need to be doing. So there are a lot of questions that need to be answered there. By starting out in this place where we're looking at these ideas of unions and bringing things together, studying this relationship with and our methods for connecting to love is a great way to get started. I would love to know what your thoughts about this chapter are, because I think this chapter is the most interesting in a lot of ways. And it's not just because of my weird relationship with Angus, which is a whole other story that maybe I'll tell on the podcast someday. He's Bridget's brother and the whole thing there. But I would love to know what you think. If you don't have anything, like if you're one of those people that would like to comment, but you don't know what to comment, I think there's a swan emoji. So maybe just put like a swan emoji or 2 swan emojis in the chat, because then at least you can help with the engagement. But yeah, I would really like to know what you think about everything here, how we can connect to this energy of love, how it actually will influence our work, and exactly how you, if you already have an understanding of these unions to bring energy together to set up a current. Because I would love to know what you think. So if you're listening to us on YouTube or Spotify, you can leave a comment right there. If you're listening to us anywhere else, even if they say you can leave a comment, they do not let us know. so we won't know. Leave a comment there anyway, because engagement is magic. And then head over to creationpaths.com, click on chat, and you leave a comment there, and we will see it and be able to respond. While you're there, if you happen to have a few dollars you can pass our way, we offer both monthly and annual memberships. You can also support us on Patreon and Entropy. I am CE Dorset on both. And we now have a Cash App hashtag, which is hashtag Creations Paths. Thank you to everybody who is helping us out in that way. It helps us to keep the lights on, keep a roof over our head, and keep food on our table. We really want to make this our full-time job. I have a whole bunch of other things I would love to be doing for this, but we're trying to save up for resources and everything. So thank you for everybody who's helping to make all of this possible. If you don't have anybody right now, or you're not sure that we're the kind of people that you want to invest your hard-earned treasure in, that's 100% all right. But if anything we've done has helped you out, or you think would help somebody else out, please share it with them. That helps us immensely. All right. Before we go, and I'm warning y'all now, this is one of those few prayers that if you don't want Angus in your life, now may be the time to stop a little bit early. So that's who we're going to call on right now. But sweet Angus, brother of Brigid, child of the Dagda and Boan, may we hear the sweet song of your birds, constantly calling us to the love of all creation, our fellow travelers in this world, and to our sweet and beloved partners that we are blessed to live with. Help us every day to find the strength to transform into all of the forms that we need to as we run off into the sweet land of dreams that Kaer Ibormeith governs. Amen.
Amen.